We've spent so much focus on the ACC schools that the Big 12 will add, but Washington State and Oregon State are right there for cheaper. That's where we should go. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State. And you're thinking, Washington State, Oregon State, Kansas State. Well, because of life circumstances, he lives in the Pacific Northwest. Not only is he the biggest Wildcats fan that I know, but he knows ball when it comes to realignment on that coast. We'll get there first. Why are we talking Wake Forest, NC State, Pitt, when Washington State and Oregon State, for cheaper, could add possibly more to the conference? Then the quarterbacks in this league, so much better than the SEC, and I think I'm tired of pretending that they aren't. This is something that needs to be exposed. And finally, you told me, Christian, a couple of months ago, BYU and Kansas State would meet in the Big 12 title. A lot has changed since that day, and I wonder if that opinion has changed. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Christian, people will look at this, and they'll say, the Big 12 doesn't need Washington State and Oregon State. I already mentioned cheaper. I think they are overall better athletic commitments than Cal and Stanford were to the ACC. I think that if you wanted to add schools for athletic prowess, Oregon State, Washington State could be there. And here is where I ultimately believe the Big 12 wins with those two brands. Seattle-Tacoma market. Washington State alumni are mostly in that market, 12th largest in the nation. Portland is 22nd. That is where a primary swath of the viewership of Oregon State resides. The ACC, Raleigh-Durham, 24th. Pittsburgh, 26th. And Wake Forest is just kind of off the map altogether. This is a viewership, a numbers game at this point, and two of the most passionate fan bases that got left completely off the table.
Yeah, last Big 12 squad, we talked about the ACC, and we talked about how certain schools like Georgia Tech would make sense to add because of the Atlanta area. It makes perfect sense to add a Washington State because of the Seattle area, Drake. You mentioned, even though it's Pullman, I live an hour north of Seattle, just a little bit behind the scenes here, and I see way more license plates, decals, stickers on the back of vehicles that have Washington State Cougars than UW Huskies. And that is no doubt. That is an absolute fact. When I'm seeing driving around town, whatever the case may be, Washington State is for Washington State. It's exactly what that is. So when you're talking about the brands, not only do you get a potential rivalry twice with a Big 10 conference school when you add them to the Big 12, which I think could be huge for the brand for both Big 12 and the Big 10. You also bring in not just another West Coast team. You bring in two West Coast teams in the North Pacific Northwest, and then you get Pac-12 after dark, but Big 12 style. And I think that's absolutely a win.
You know, Christian, a piece of this, some people will say, well, they already rebuilt the Pac-12. Why would they exit? In my opinion, and I don't think that their fan bases would disagree, the reason they've rebuilt the Pac-12 is to show, hey, we still have prowess in college athletics, mostly in college football. Not only that, they're attempting to leverage a move from the Pac-12. You would be silly in the same way that I'll be transparent, in the same way that if you're Oklahoma State and the SEC offers you a spot, you have to take it. It's $20 million more per year. Washington State and Oregon State want to prove to the power conferences they are so big in athletics that they can rebuild their conference that was dead in the water and down to two teams. And if they can do that, I think it proves their commitment is strong enough to add value to the Big 12. Again, at probably a lower price tag than a Louisville or an NC State.
I'm with you. And I think just alone based on the ESPN media deal from the ACC has, even though that is possibly set to expire after the 2030 season, we'll see what happens there. But I'm with you. I think that if you brought in a Washington State, you brought in an Oregon State, you would most likely be able to get them on the cheap side compared to some of these other schools on the East Coast. But look, although I am a Big 12 believer, a Dolce Grande believer, Drake, I do think the Pac-12 still has value. I do. And I think you also have to talk about, again, just pulling back the curtains here, Oregon State and Washington State, I think, have this ego now. I think they might be too proud to leave the Pac-12 because everybody else left and they didn't. They fought that lawsuit. They won to keep the rights of the Pac-12, the stay put. And they're kind of like now the new OGs of this new conference that are going to be involved with some of these other G5 schools making that step forward. So I feel like it's a tough spot for them if they wanted to move. but money talks, and we all know that.
Now, West Virginia fans don't want to hear this. This is not an episode that they're very excited about because they want Pitt, they want Louisville, and I do believe the ACC here in a couple of years will implode. To me, what you could do with this move, parlayed with Louisville, parlayed with Pitt or Virginia Tech, and making the Big 12 a 20-team or 22-team conference, is now you have a scheduling slate where Utah can play BYU, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Washington State, Oregon State every year. We bring back regionality in conferences like the Southwest Conference or the Big Eight or the old SEC, but we do it within the leagues themselves. So now you get some of these classic regional matchups, and you're seeing the Big 12 being played at 11 o'clock Eastern time at night, which sucks for me, the guy who has to watch every game, but it's awesome for a conference that's trying to grow its brand coast to coast. The more we spread this out, the more we can actually regionalize the matchups and get back to what we love about college football, and those are the local games.
I'm with you. And look, we're talking about some of these West Coast games this year that the Big 12 has to play on Friday nights or late on Saturdays as well. That might not be enticing for some of these Big 12 fans. As you mentioned yourself, being on the East Coast, that's not going to be the most exciting thing in the world. But being able to have a primetime game on both the East, the Central, the Mountain, and the Pacific time coast is huge for the brand. And I really think that's what Brett Yormark's pushing for. You already have that Southwest portion covered with Arizona and Arizona State. You even have it with BYU and Utah as well towards the middle. Might as well keep going up towards that Pacific Northwest. It makes a lot of sense to maybe focus towards a Wazzu or Oregon State and see if you can make that happen. So although I'm going to say I'm a little doubtful that actually happens, because I do think that they are going to stick with the Pac-12 and watch it die, be the captain on the Titanic, stand there, watch the water come in if it does fall when it comes to Washington State and Oregon State, just because I think they're too proud. I think it makes a lot of sense for Yormark to just try.
I do too. And again, the cheaper option. They're going to be cheap. They will not have to take a full revenue share. They understand that, yet they'll still make more in the Big 12 than they would have made in the Pac-12. And now you have Washington State, you have Seattle, and you have Orlando. And that is something that the ACC wants to tell you, like, oh, well, we have Malibu, California now. And you're like, okay, but that's a school that's not committed to football. They're committed to tennis, yes, and cross country, but are they committed to football? And that's why I think overall the loss the ACC took by going west was because they chose the wrong schools. The Big 12 could choose the correct schools, still get a couple from the East, and be ultimately a stronger conference, in my opinion. Coming up, speaking of strong conferences, this is the conference for quarterbacks. And the SEC is actually pretty bad. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Can I be honest with you? I was doing some the work this weekend, and when the work ended, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out and have a couple of brews with the boys. So I went out and I had a couple of drinks with the guys. You stay out. The bar's open until 2, and nothing got too crazy. But work doesn't end until midnight, so you get like an hour and a half of good just fraternizing. Then you wake up the next day and you got to do it all over again. Go to work and do it. And 5 Hour Energy. You got to get up. You didn't get a lot of sleep. 5 Hour Energy. Minus the alcohol. You get the flavor of transfusions. That's right. Bold grape, ginger, lime, all in a 5 Hour Energy. Some days on the golf course or at work, you need the extra boost to stay energized. 5hourenergy.com today. That is the number 5, hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying 18 holes, you can turn 18 holes in 30 seconds with 5 Hour Energy. Get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. That's 5 Hour Energy. Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State. You own one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 in Avery Johnson, but he's not the best quarterback in the Big 12. He would be the best quarterback in the SEC. What I find crazy is when I go to the quarterback power rankings for the Southeastern Conference, they have in the top 6, 7, the quarterback from Vanderbilt. It's just like the old guy from Vanderbilt. Garrett Nussmeier's good. I'm going to give you that. I think most of the country is starting to learn that Nussmeier's good. Behind him, the number 2 quarterback in the SEC, Arch Manning, just has the last name Manning. I'm not saying he's bad, but he just has the last name Manning. And if he didn't, he wouldn't be number 2. Number 3, Lenoris Sellers. 4, John Mateer, who hasn't played a single snap of SEC football. DJ Lagway, who has not been a full season starter in the SEC. Diego Pavia, Talon Green. If I asked, Austin Simmons is 8. Christian, you and I both know ball. If you asked me 30 minutes ago, who does Austin Simmons play for? It's like, yeah, I play with that guy in junior high. That guy was on our JV team when I was in high school. The SEC just doesn't have quarterbacks.
Yeah, Simmons, what's he play for, the 76ers? Yeah, I wouldn't know either. I really wouldn't know. I'm with you. Yeah, the SEC, look, you can maybe make some arguments that they have some of the best programs in college football, and I'll listen to it. I listen to the argument. But if they're going to come at you and say that they have the best quarterbacks, and just because their last name has someone with the biggest forehead in the past history, there's no way that's going to happen. The Big 12 has some of the best quarterbacks in the conference, in all of college football, from top to bottom. And not only do we see this conference being one of the most, with the most parity from top to bottom, where you could see a team that finishes from the bottom or projected to finish in the bottom, like Arizona State, win the whole dang thing. Or you could see an Oklahoma State who was 0-9 last year, but did have a win against an SEC opponent, battle this year for the Big 12. And would you be surprised? Because I surely wouldn't, actually. And at least slightly wouldn't be surprised. When he looks at these quarterbacks, Avery Johnson, I'm going to go ahead and say one thing I disagree with you from the front, Drake, is that he is the best quarterback in the Big 12. I think he is one of the dark horse candidates. I think he's a dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy.
Woo!
I do. I'm putting it out there on Dolce Grande. I think that absolutely happens. But when you look at some of these other quarterbacks, don't get me wrong, there are some great ones. Sam Levitt's amazing. I think Sawyer Robinson's great. I think Josh Hoover slept on way too much. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in this league. And even with the whole scenario happening with BYU right now, with the Retzlaff stuff, him moving to Tulane, I still think that doesn't change the narrative that this is the best conference in college football when it comes to starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, you didn't say Rocco Becton there, did you? You respect the rivalry. You get it.
It's August now. We don't talk about that.
No, we don't. I'm reading CBS Sports power rankings for the SEC quarterbacks. Again, Austin Simmons. That's a name we just threw into chat GPT. Name me an SEC quarterback, and it said Austin Simmons. At 9, Ty Simpson, which was the second option that chat GPT would give you if you auto-generated one. That's the quarterback at Alabama. And I didn't know that. Austin Simmons, this is a great write-up from CBS Sports, by the way. Like Lincoln Riley's passers, you can just pencil in production under Lane Kiffin. So they don't even have an example of why he's good. That's the 8th best quarterback, according to CBS Sports in the SEC. And their only explanation is, well, his coach is good. From there, Zach Calzada at Kentucky. That's a name that we all forgot about. Joey Aguilar at Tennessee. Bo Pribula at Missouri. That's ChatGPT create a fake name for a human being. And in the Big 12, you look, 7, 8, 9 names down the list. At 8 is Jalen Daniels. America remembers that name. Like he's a formidable quarterback at Kansas. At 10, Connor Wegman. America knows that name because he's been such a recruiting controversy since he was in high school. At 11, Noah Fafita. 12, Caden Salter. Those are names America knows. You turn to the SEC and you see the name Marcel Reed. That's not. And that's the quarterback at Texas A&M, this storied program that wants to rise in the ranks of college football. The Big 12, even down the list of quarterbacks, Nico Marchiol has made some noise in this conference and sits at like 14 here. That goes to show not only is there a gap between the Big 12 and the SEC, I think, Christian, this is a pretty sizable gap.
No, I agree. When you're looking at the quarterback position, I think it's a sizable gap for sure. And what's crazy is that there's been this off-season narrative for the past couple of years saying that the Big 12 and the ACC are becoming these recruiting grounds for the Big 10 and for the SEC to steal from. You don't see that happening with the quarterback position. None of these quarterbacks, you all know that they were poached. You know that they were happening, especially when the whole Tennessee Nico thing happened. Avery Johnson was contacted. Even our good friend Rocco, right? I'll mention him there. There it is. He was tampered with.
There was a lot of him. You said good friend. This is crazy. We 180'd right there.
Yeah, well, new guy Nick. Okay, I'll go ahead and give him his credits where we can. But there's a lot of things when it comes to this quarterback conference, because that's what we are now. We are a quarterback conference, and they are willing to stay because they believe that the retention is important, and they see something big happening here. And something that big is going to happen this year. I'll go ahead and add another hot take on Locked On Big 12. I don't even know if it's a hot take, but 2 of those quarterbacks will be fighting for the college football playoffs this year. There will be 2 teams in the playoffs from the Big 12.
I like that. And I like it because of the quarterback play. You could argue that Utah last year, and Utah fans would, that they were a quarterback away from being 9-3, even 8-4, having a more successful season than 5-7 because they had good pieces. Injury issues were part of it, but injury issues happen all across the Big 12 for everybody. College football is how it goes. And this year, if we talk about quarterbacks being the catalyst to get you to the college football playoff, the Big 12 has the deepest conference, the best conference, and the most talent at the quarterback position. Now, it goes to the question is, if your quarterback's really good, we're kind of going to learn this with our Auburn and Baylor. We'll learn this a bit. Your quarterback can be really good, but if you aren't as strong in the trenches as some of those SEC schools, as the Georgias, as the Alabamas and LSUs, things can go south very quickly. But at QB, this conference has an advantage. I'll leave this conversation here. You said Avery Johnson's the best quarterback in the Big 12. And look, he's definitely top 3. I think Sawyer Robertson's right there with him and Sam Leavitt. What makes you put him above Sam Leavitt?
Well, I'll give credit to Sam Leavitt first because he got to the Big 12 championship. He won it. He was completely doubted. He was one play away from his team was one play away from beating Texas in the college football playoffs. So credit to him. And I don't think he's going to regress in any way, shape, or form. But I think Avery Johnson is going to take such a huge step forward in 2025. I think that he has finally not just had the keys to being, okay, you're the quarterback that's replacing Will Howard at Kansas State. Now you are just the guy, Avery. You are the guy. You are the leader of this roster. And we're not going to bounce back and forth and have 2 co-offensive coordinators to have you make decisions. It's going to be Matt Wells and Matt Wells only. And he's had great traction when it comes to the pass, when it comes to quarterbacks, training them to be NFL-ready type quarterbacks. He has some great experience with Jordan Love when he was the head coach at Utah State. He focuses really hard on the play action, which as a dual-threat quarterback in Avery Johnson, I think that's fantastic for him. And then you look at his surrounding cast, Drake, and I think it's just amazing what they have. You have Dylan Edwards, who's so speedy. He might be one of the fastest running backs in the conference. And he's not only there's other great running backs in that room as well. You add size and Jaron Bradley and Jared Tips on the wide receiver room, 6'3", 6'4", something Avery didn't have last year. And then you bring back the best tight end room in the country that led the entire country in red zone touchdowns with 13. You bring back all 4 of those guys that made a contribution there, plus adding in Lincoln Cure as the top tight end in the program's history, top prospect, top recruit in program history. He goes to that tight end room as well. So many weapons. And I think that alone is why Avery Johnson makes that big step forward.
Let's get into Avery Johnson being in the Big 12 championship game, because I know you still believe that Kansas State will be there. I can only assume that's a little bit of your job here. But then again, you said a couple of months ago BYU would be the contender right there with them. And I wonder if that's changed in your mind. This is the Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. The other night, I'm walking through St. Paul, Minnesota, and I realized, looking at my phone, the band The Red Clay Strays are playing like 15 minutes from me. Show starts at 9. This is 9:15 when I look. I was like, whoa, what? Go to Game Time. Tickets are $10. The show starts, they're $10. So I buy them. I get there. The band came on a little bit late, so I'm there at 9:30. They play until 11. For $10 in the pit, I got to see one of the best bands out there right now, The Red Clay Strays. We've all been there. You log in early. You're the first one to get tickets, and they're $1 million. With Game Time, you take the stress away. You can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling? Game Time's zone deals pick the best seats in your section. You get the panoramic seat view, and the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, and that is guaranteed with Game Time. Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State. You told me, you said Kansas State and BYU are pretty likely picks for the Big 12 championship this season, and that was a while ago. Now, look, I still agree. ESPN has BYU as one of the best teams in the Big 12, top 4, according to their metrics right now. And even without Jake Retzlaff, who wasn't their most crucial player, and to me isn't the end-all, be-all for BYU being good. Let me start here before we get to the Cougars. Do you still think Kansas State's in the Big 12 championship?
Yes, I do. I do think Kansas State has the opportunity to get back to Arlington for the first time since 2022. I like all the additions. I mentioned that last segment with the wide receivers, the offense, you name it. I think Avery Johnson takes a huge step forward. I think the offensive line, they added some great players in the transfer portal. Now, there is going to be some concerns right in week 0. The newly named starting left tackle, George Fitzpatrick, has a medical injury. He's already been ruled out for week 0, so that's a huge concern. But I do think the depth is going to be important. And I like where the defense sits, although we hear from media days that they are way behind from the offense compared to where they were at media days heading into fall camp. I still like Austin Romaine. I think he's, him alone, one of the best players in the Big 12, period. Not just position, just all players, period. And having him as your leader on the defense is huge. So I think they can make a return. I think their schedule is favorable if they can get past Iowa State and Dublin, because that's a coin flip. I mean, look, Dublin, week 0, that's hard to prepare for. You can't really prepare for a game that you've never kind of done week 0 on the road and internationally. So that's going to be a tough one. If they can get past that, I think it's favorable to at least go 7-2 in the conference. And I think that's enough for Arlington.
For BYU, and that's the bigger question mark now, I think, without Jake Retzlaff, who wasn't a top 10 quarterback in the Big 12 in QBR last year, 11th. So if you replace him with someone who's average, then by the numbers, you're getting a better quarterback than Jake Retzlaff. But what they bring in, Chase Roberts offensively, LJ Martin offensively, will help lead that team. It's the defense for the Cougars. Jack Kelly, Isaiah Glasker, Keanu Tanuvasa, who is already preseason getting a lot of accolades in the Big 12. It's their defense that makes them so dangerous. Do you still think BYU without Jake Retzlaff's in the hunt?
I'll be honest with you. I have been very hesitant to continue to keep BYU as my favorite to face Kansas State and Arlington, just because I feel like it's such a hard thing entering fall camp with a quarterback battle and then assuming that you can be a top team. It's just such an important position. Now, I agree with you that Retzlaff wasn't the say all be all in BYU being successful last year, but just knowing that you have to make a decision on one of 3 quarterbacks before you hit week 1 against Portland State, at least you have an FCS opponent to kind of get your fix in, then to me, it's just a little concerning. But you mentioned it. They have amazing weapons. Their defense is outstanding. I am a huge fan of LJ Martin. I think he's a great player. I do think that they can make a step forward. I will go on record to say that I have switched my pick. I have gone back to the Arizona State, Kansas State. But let me go ahead and put this on record. That no Big 12 team, including the newcomers in Arizona State last year, have gone back-to-back since 2004, 2005 Colorado, if you do not include
Colorado,
unless you do not include Texas or Oklahoma, who left for the SEC.
Sure.
Current members, no one has gone back-to-back since 2004, 2005 Colorado. So that one kind of dampers my prediction a little bit. But I wouldn't be shocked if BYU finds their way back and stays consistent. And it does help, Drake, that they do not play Kansas State.
I was like 3 years old when Colorado was good. The last time they were good, good enough to be in the Big 12 championship. That's crazy. They went back to back. The schedules. I'll get to BYU's in a second. For Kansas State, you get Iowa State, and that's the one. Everybody kind of circling like, oh shoot, that's a big one. That's definitely up there. North Dakota behind that, Army, and then at Arizona, UCF at home. This is a pretty easy 4-1, and a fairly confident 5-0. In my book. From there, you have Baylor, and then TCU has Josh Hoover, who you've mentioned. Kansas, but on the road. Texas Tech looks really good, and you finish up in that last 3 games with a game in Rice-Eccles Stadium at Utah. The back half of this K-State schedule is pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's not the easiest schedule. Don't get me wrong, but I think that they can handle it. If they can get past Iowa State, which again, I think it's a coin flip, I think that they can be just fine heading into Waco. And I'm with you. I think the Waco was one that's my initial, could be a scare factor. You never know what Dave Aranda, 1, is going to say. And 2 is going to bring to Waco when you play, because he's such a polarizing coach. There's some times where he's on the hot seat. There's some times where you're talking about him going to be a sure thing in Arlington. So I'm not really quite sure what Baylor's going to bring it this year, but I can tell you that Sawyer Robertson is going to continue to shine as long as he's healthy. And then we don't know about Texas Tech, right? We're not sure what's going to bring from Texas Tech. Can they get past 9 wins? That's the biggest question mark. If they do, great. I'm not going to talk about the Sunflower Showdown because that's not a rivalry. You have to win the games in order to be a rivalry, so I'm not worried about that one until they do.
It's been a while.
And then I will say that the final road trip in Stillwater and in Utah, I mean, if you're not careful, you could fall in one of those. That could definitely happen. But while we're on the topic of BYU, and if I can make them come back to Arlington. Although I have changed my prediction, Drake, to think that they might not make it, I will say this. The hype is still higher than what it is with Utah. BYU will finish atop of Utah in the Big 12 standings when it's all said and done.
The biggest piece now that helps me justify BYU still being in Arlington in my book, I think it's Texas Tech, BYU, Kansas State are really my big three going into the season.
It's fair.
The way that I justify it for BYU is they have the easiest schedule, but just the way this shakes out, arguably out of the Power Three. I mean, I'm going to keep the ACC out of this, but of the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10, they have the easiest one. They have Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina. I'm pretty sure we're good there. Hopefully we're going to be okay. We're all Big 12 roots for the Big 12 and non-conference. Then on the road against Colorado, and there's so many question marks around Colorado. At home against West Virginia, and Rich Rod's still got a lot he's got to put together. I think West Virginia could be a sneaky 8-4, 9-3, but that's a tough one. And you're going to play that in Lavelle Edwards. Then you go at Arizona. They're going to be bad this year. Utah is a home game, and we've already mentioned those rivalries, especially when you're playing at home, and you should be okay. On the road against Iowa State, bye week, on the road against Texas Tech. That's where I see two not surefire losses, but if you do drop both of those, that's where it gets complicated. If you split them, you're in great shape. You host TCU. BYU's great at home. You go to Cincinnati. They're not very good. You host UCF. They're not very good. Like, Christian, that's, again, let me go through these schools again out of the Big 12. We are non-conference easy. Colorado, slated in the back half. West Virginia, back half. Arizona, back half. Utah in the middle. Iowa State, Texas Tech, TCU, possible contenders. Then Cincinnati and UCF are at the bottom of the conference. That's so many schools that just shouldn't make waves in the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, CBS Sports came out with their whole strength of schedule thoughts a few weeks ago, and BYU was considered the easiest strength of schedule in all of the Big 12. They were at the bottom, and they were by a long shot. So if you're looking at it just alone by strength of schedule, if they can get the quarterback woes taken care of in their hopefully easy non-conference schedule, when they get the Big 12 play and they're ready to roll, then yeah, they could easily get to 7-2 or potentially 8-1 in the conference. And look, I think 7-2 is good enough to make the Arlington this year. The parity is so crazy. And I think we're going to go back to what we were at like 2 years ago, Drake, where we're heading into the final 2 weeks or final 1 week of the season. And there's like 7 teams with all these crazy scenarios for who's going to make it to Arlington. I can totally see that happen again. So I think 8-1 is like the sure thing. But I think we're going to get one 7-2 team that makes it in, but it's going to be some crazy tiebreakers. BYU could easily be in that scenario. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, 7-2 was the big one last year. That's just kind of where you needed to get to, and that's where the Big 12, that's where Arizona State got to in Big 12 play and made the college football playoff and made waves there as well under Kenny Dillingham. Christian, always a pleasure. Always fun to do these shows. They go by so fast. What if we did an hour? What if lockdown was an hour concept every day? That'd be a lot.
I'd be ready every single day.
You would, and people would be ready to make us their first listens. Where can folks find more of your work?
Locked On Kansas State, anywhere you listen to podcasts, anywhere you are on YouTube, audio forms, you name it. Hey, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, and we haven't even covered the football season yet. We're still new, we're still growing, but we bring you Wildcat coverage like no one else every single day, and we're bringing you coverage every single day, even the weekends, all through August. So you get the week 0, the first college football game of the year, Iowa State, Kansas State in Dublin. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can find us on Twitter at Locked On K-State.
And you haven't had a full football season yet, have you?
We started right after the bowl game last year.
Oh, brutal, man. What a build-up to this football season for Kansas State and Locked On Kansas State. You can follow Christian Rauh at Locked On K-State on the old X thing. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. It's a crossover with Kansas State. And thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.